Good morning. It's Wednesday, I think. I've lost all track of time anymore, so it's hard to tell sometimes. But I'm pretty sure it's Wednesday, and as usual, I'm here to talk about some of the cool things that I'm working on or building. And a lot of these days, it's Alexa stuff. I have a few things that I want to show off before we get started. Um, but we're going to build an Alexa skill from scratch today. I haven't even really decided what it's going to do yet. But I think it's going to be along the lines of a skill that I built recently. Let's see if I can get that light off of there a little bit. So you can see that I have a command for an Alexa skill here. Alexa, ask Jeff Blankenburg to set the light to red.
The lamp has been set to red. Tune into twitch.tv/Jeff Blankenburg to see it change live on air. What else do you want to know about Jeff?
Stop. So the idea here is that
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Thank you. So the idea here is that I've built a skill, and the name of the skill is Jeff Blankenburg. So if you want to use this on your device, you can just say the name of your device. I won't do that to set off all the devices. And then you can say enable Jeff Blankenburg. And what that will do is it'll add that skill to your collection of skills. And then you can say things like this. Set the light to red, set the light to pink. The colors that it currently supports are red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, white, pink, and cyan. So good morning, Utah. Give me two. This is a friend of mine from the great state of Texas. Thank you, Ryan, for being here. Stephen Vore, thank you for being here. You're absolutely right. I don't know that it's Twitch that's making Everyday Friday. I feel like it might be more that this little pandemic of ours is making every day feel like I have no idea what time or day or anything is. So I'm glad you're all here. LJ, thank you for joining. It's good to see you this morning. For those of you that it is morning, I've had some folks join me from Europe recently, and I keep saying good morning, realizing that it's late in their afternoon. So, as I mentioned, and as the stream says here on the screen, I'm going to be building an Alexa skill from scratch today. And so that means really, really from scratch. We're not going to have any pre-built code. We're not going to pull anything in from anywhere else. We're just going to write some code, and we're going to make a skill that does something interesting. And the idea is that I'm going to try and build a skill like this. So this thing, the setting the color, is just one aspect of that skill. We're going to build the other stuff, and I'll give you a quick demo of how it works. So we'll just talk to my skill, and I'll show you kind of the functionality that we're going to build here during the next 2 hours or so. Alexa, ask Jeff Blankenburg.
Hi, I'm Jeff Blankenburg. You can ask to hear my latest tweets, send me a message, or ask for my contact information. What else do you want to know about Jeff?
What's your Twitter handle?
For pretty much everything, you can find me as Jeff Blankenburg. All one word. This includes Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch, among other things. I've also written my business card to your Alexa app in case you need it later. What else do you want to know about Jeff?
What is your favorite color?
I am way too old to have a favorite color. But it's orange. What else do you want to know about Jeff?
What is your email address?
My email address is alexa@jeffblankenburg.com. I've also written my business card to your Alexa app in case you need it later. What else do you want to know about Jeff?
Stop.
Chow chow, brown cow.
All right, so you can see that we have a skill that can give us some basic contact information, right? So you could build one of these with your own name, and then once you've done that, you could have people ask what your phone number is, or what your email address is, or what your favorite color is. It also knows things like my favorite football team, my favorite baseball team, and I can continue to add to that, and we'll also talk about how we might be able to do things like sorry, I got distracted by Ryan's comment there. That skill is so very Jeff Blankenburg. You're right, it is, but it's a good demo example of things that you can do, and so I thought it was kind of fun to play with, and the idea that I know Ryan at some point is going to change the color of this light behind me will be fun as well. So let's get right into it. The first thing that I want to do is if you guys want to follow along, I'm not going to move at a pace where you can probably do every single thing as we watch. Some things will happen a little faster maybe than you'd like if you were following along. But I want you to know where these things are and be able to use them as you go through this. So what I'm going to have you do, if you'd like to follow along a little bit, is to go to developer.amazon.com. And so I'll flip over here. This is the browser for it at developer.amazon.com. And what I want to do is start from very, very scratch. So this is, once you come in here, in fact, I'll start at the very beginning. That's not even fair. So developer.amazon.com looks like this. And you'll click on Developer Console here at the top. And once you've done that, you're going to come over to Alexa, because this developer.amazon.com website...
Sorry, I don't know that.
This developer.amazon.com website is actually for all of the development you could do for a lot of Amazon's products. So this includes things like login with Amazon, Amazon Dash services, and also building things for the Fire tablets and TV. So if you're building apps for those kinds of things, this is the same place that you'll come. But what you do is you go to a different section of it depending on what you're trying to build for. So if we hover over Alexa, you can see there's Alexa Skills Kit and there's Alexa Voice Service. The one that we're going to focus on today is Alexa Skills Kit, but I'll tell you very quickly about what Alexa Voice Service is. If you have an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi or something like that laying around your house, this is a good example of how you might use that, but you can take the Alexa Voice Service and load that onto your Raspberry Pi, and once you've done that, you actually have built yourself your own Alexa device. So at that point you would be able to talk to it. You'd have to plug in a very inexpensive USB microphone. They sell them. They're like the little USB tips that you get sometimes with like a wireless keyboard. They're about that big, the microphone is, and you just plug it into the side of your Raspberry Pi. And once you have a microphone connected to the device, you can talk to the device just like any other Echo or Echo Dot or anything like that. And it'll connect to the internet. You can use all the skills. You can use the full Alexa service directly from your own hardware. And the beauty of this is, if you're a hardware builder, if you're somebody that makes hardware products for other people to buy, you could build Alexa directly into those things. So let's say that you're a toaster manufacturer and you really want to make a smart toaster where people can talk to it. I don't know why a toaster would be the thing, but it is something that lives on everybody's kitchen counter generally, so it might be a nice idea to be able to put voice right into that instead of having two devices. All you'd need to do is have something like a Raspberry Pi or some chip that can support it. And once you've done that, then you just go ahead and add the microphone to your hardware, they plug the toaster in, and boom, they have an Alexa toaster. So that's what the Alexa Voice Service is. Again, we're not going to spend any time on that today. But if that scratches an itch for you, or that's something that you find interesting, I highly recommend checking it out. There's some great tutorials and code samples. You don't have to write much of anything. You'll just have to install some software and get things running, and it's pretty easy to do. So I'm going to jump over to Alexa Skills Kit, and this is where we end up in the Alexa Developer Console. So this is where I'm going to build my skills, and as you scroll down, you can see that I have a Create Skill button here. We're going to click that in just a minute, but I want to give you a quick tour of this as well. So I have lots and lots of skills. You can see that I've built a unofficial Star Wars databank. That's one of the skills that I just recently published. If you want to use a skill where you can ask about literally anything in the Star Wars universe, this is the place for you. I'm also working on a few others, but the few others that are published, I have a lot that I've built kind of as samples and demos, but I do have one called Name That Show, which is a simple demo, but I published it, and it lets you try to guess what TV show I'm thinking of. Another one I've built, which unfortunately isn't going to be able to be used very soon, is one called Games Back, and the point of this is to be able to tell you how many games back your favorite Major League Baseball team is. The season was supposed to start this weekend, and it's obviously not going to start. And there's actually lines in Las Vegas, gambling lines, that say that they don't think it'll start before July 1st. So very, very interesting times we're living in, and my skill's not obviously going to have a whole lot to do until we actually play some baseball. So this is a long list of just the skills that you may or may not have created. If you come here for the first time, you're not going to have any, and that's okay. But what I'm going to do is hit Create Skill, and this is how we're going to walk through basically building our very first skill. Now, as we get into this, the first couple of sections of this are pretty easy. It's click and choose and things like that. But we will eventually get to writing some code, and that's where we'll make decisions about what Alexa is going to say. So the way I like to think about this is that you can use this developer console for everything related to what the user will say. So we'll decide what the name of our skill is, so that, like we say, Jeff Blankenburg. or if we call it unofficial Star Wars databank or whatever it might be, that's the name of our skill, and that's where we're starting here. But then on top of that, we're also going to want to be able to decide what Alexa is going to say back to the user. All of that is done in code. And I'll show you that stuff later, but I just want you to understand that everything the user says comes through what we're doing now, and everything that Alexa says will come out of our code, if that makes sense. So we're going to dig into this. I also want to make sure that I mention that I'm doing this in a simple, very visual way, but generally I do this all from the Alexa command line. And so there's a Alexa CLI that you can use, and you can do all of this directly from the command line. And that's generally where I live. But this is because I'm trying to do this for beginners and I want to show it from scratch. That's why we're looking at this view here. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a name for my skill. And in this case, I don't want to use my name because I've already built that, but I have a collection of toys here behind me. And you can see that I have all sorts of characters, and the wider the shot I make, the more there are, and sometimes it's a little embarrassing to show the whole collection. But what I need is the name of a person. So what I'll do is I'll call it Freddy Funko. That is the mascot of this little toy line. He looks like this. He's always wearing a crown. And so I'm going to use his name as the example here. That way I can go find the data for their specific company and whatever. Now I'm not going to publish this, but it'll give us a good example of how this is all going to work. All right, so the next thing we need to do is choose the model that we're going to use to add our skill. So 99% of the time when you're building an Alexa skill, you're probably going to choose custom. That makes sense for nearly everything that you're going to want to do, except when it falls into one of these other categories. And so a flash briefing skill is done when you have something like daily content. It's a pre-built model, so you don't have to decide at all what the user is going to say. It's already controlled for you, but you don't really have any control over what Alexa says either, other than to point it at a specific blog post or an RSS feed or something like a podcast list. So that a flash briefing, the way it works is if you ask Alexa for like my daily news or my flash briefing, the user gets to choose what's included in their flash briefing. And oftentimes that'll be like a specific news source or maybe the weather information. And so as they're getting ready in the morning, Alexa is reading through each one of these news sources as she encounters them in the order that the user chose. It's super nice and super convenient to be able to configure that and set it up the way that you'd like. And building a flash briefing skill gives your users the ability to put your content into their flash briefing. So that's what a flash briefing is. Smart home, again, you're going to build this skill. It's very pre-built. It revolves around things like on and off and set things brighter and lower or open and close a garage door. But a smart home skill has a very specific set of things a user can say to it again, like turn on the kitchen lights, and it's used to communicate directly with smart home devices. So if you are building a smart home device, you will also need a smart home skill, and that's what that one is. For a music skill, this is when you have a collection of music and it allows a user to, again, do very specific things with your content, like play, search, pause, skip, stuff like that. The same goes for video, right? We can have a collection of videos, and this allows users to search and find and interact with the videos that they're looking for. And then finally, there's meetings. This is a relatively new one, but what this allows us to do is leverage the Alexa for Business stuff, which is an AWS service, and it allows us to do things like configure all of our meeting spaces and meeting rooms in our office so that people can book meetings and start meetings directly from a specific device. So if you took every conference room in your office and you put an Alexa on the conference room table, people could walk into the room and say, start my meeting, and it would know exactly what meeting to start. It would fire it up. It would connect it to anybody that's also dialing in. It's a really nice technology, but again, it's one of those things that you build only for specific cases where pretty much everything else you can imagine is going to be done with custom. So I'm going to leave this on custom. The next thing that I'm going to do is choose how I want to host my backend. I mentioned that we're going to have some code for this, and there's three options we have here. Really, there's two. It just depends on what language you want. Provision your own is what most people probably select. And this allows you to host it anywhere that you'd like. So if you have a server living under your desk and that's really where you want to host the back end of your service, you can totally do it there. If you use Azure or you use AWS or whatever, you're welcome to set up serverless functions there to do the things that you want to do. There's no restriction on where you put your backend, but I will highly, highly recommend, especially if you're getting started, that I would choose one of these Alexa hosted options, either the Node.js or the Python. And the reason that I recommend these is because they're completely free. There's no reason not to take advantage of free. And for both of these, you have some pretty high limits, 5 gigs of media storage, 15 gigs of monthly data transfer. I mean, that's a lot of data transfer every single month. And they also give you some DynamoDB table space for session persistence and things like that. So again, you can do this wherever you want. So don't feel like you have to use AWS or anything like that. But man, I'd be hard pressed for you to give me a reason why you shouldn't use something like this. And so I'm going to use Node.js. I prefer JavaScript as my backend programming language for Alexa skills. If you really want to see me fumble, we could pick Python. I just don't know Python as well, and we'd spend a lot of time on syntax, which I don't want to do today. So we're going to choose Alexa hosted. We're going to choose Node.js. And then at the very top, we'll choose create our skill. So I'm going to go ahead and create this. And the next step that it's going to offer me is what kind of template do I want to use? So we have a bunch of pre-built templates that you can use to kind of kickstart your development so that you don't have to start completely from scratch. And there's 6 of them. They're all pretty simple and straightforward. The one I'm going to choose is Hello World because it's the most basic. But we have Cakewalk, which is a skill that basically asks you what your birthday is and then remembers it, and then every time you open it from then on, it'll tell you how many days till your birthday, or it'll celebrate your birthday if it happens to be that day. Very simple, but you can see how there's a little bit of persistence in there, saving the birthday and then retrieving it and reading it. So that's what that one does. The fact skill, this is just a preloaded set of facts, and the skill will randomly select one of those facts every time the skill is opened. And so this is a good starter kit for a lot of kinds of skills. If you have facts or quotes of the day, or even like writing prompts, if you want to encourage people to write every day, a fact skill template would be great. You could use that, change out some content, and you're off and running. The ones on the bottom are a little more advanced. The quiz game skill is allowing you to basically build a quiz, right? You ask a question, the user can answer it. High-low game is one where you've probably played this before. I've picked a number between 1 and 50, and I want you to pick. I want you to guess what number it is, and you get 10 picks or something like that. And so you guess 25, and I say, no, it's higher. And you say, okay, it's 35, and I say, no, it's lower. And you slowly narrow it down. That's what that skill does. So it's a nice template to kind of understand what session management looks like, holding on to what value the users have already said, and letting them know higher or lower than the places they've already been. And then finally, Sauce Boss. This is basically a recipe skill. This allows you to navigate through a list of sauces and figure out which one you might want to use. But it also has some really nice multimodal experiences for things like this. This is my Alexa device. You can actually see my hands are here in front of it. This is my Alexa device that's sitting here in front of me, and we'll use this here in a little while to do some testing. But this has a screen on it, and so for the devices that have screens, the Sauce Boss skill is great because it lets you see what's going on the screen as well. So it gives much more information than you might find with just using voice, right? Every Alexa skill has to have a first-class voice experience. And then if you add screen stuff, that's super awesome, and you can do a lot of really cool things with it. But in order for it to be an Alexa skill, you have to support a really robust voice experience first. The additional stuff you can do on the screen is gravy. It should make your skill better, but it shouldn't prevent you from using your skill. Does that make sense? Okay, so we have Hello World. We're going to go ahead and hit choose. And now it's going to configure all this stuff. This is going to take a couple of minutes. And in that time, what we're going to do is talk about our plans. So if we think about what we really want for what I'm calling a business card skill, what we really want to be able to do is allow the user to ask for the things that they might want to know about me. So this could be my email address, my phone number, certainly where I live online. So what is my YouTube? What is my Facebook? What is my Twitter? You noticed with the demo that I did at the beginning that I said, what is your Twitter handle? And it said, oh, I'm the same everything. I have the very good fortune of having a rather unique name, Jeff Blankenburg. And so pretty much anywhere that I go, I'm able to find my username available wherever I go. Now, if your name is Joe Smith, that's probably a lot harder to find just your name. And so you might have to have Joe Smith 27 on one website and Joe Smith 19 on another because the names are just taken. And so this is where you can really specify on each individual case, like, oh, you can find me on LinkedIn as this, right? Okay, so we've gotten through the process of setting this stuff up, and you can see that I have a few checkboxes over here. Change skill invocation name. That's something I'm going to have to do, and I'm going to close out these other two boxes that are hidden behind my camera. This is kind of our intro page, and you can see that over here on the right-hand side, we have all these green checkboxes. Those mean that we've already done this thing, and that's because we chose one of these pre-built templates. So let me show you, kind of give you a quick tour through what this skill does, and we'll test it as is, just so you can see what we get out of the box, and then we'll go ahead and start making some modifications to it. So the first thing that you should see is that I have this invocation. This is the name of my skill, and you can see that we've even set it as change me because you need to change this. So we want to make this our name. Now, in my case, I already have the Jeff Blankenburg skill, which, by the way, if you want to change the color of this light, you can. All you need to do is say those magic words. But I'm going to go ahead and change this one to Freddy Funko. Now, the interesting thing about this is that this is the skill I'm building for, Freddy Funko, right? But we already named our skill. Remember at the very beginning, we came in here, we named it Freddy Funko. There's two names for every skill, and I think this is an important thing to know as you're going through this so it's not confusing. The first name that we gave it, that's kind of like the marketing name of the skill. That's the one that we'll show when we go to the skills store. So if I go to amazon.com/skills, you'll see in here that I have this long list of skills. There's all sorts of categories. There's lots of really interesting things to do in here. If you haven't seen this before, I highly recommend checking this out. But the idea is that you can come in and try any of these skills. The catch is, we can see we have a marketing name, like this one here is Relaxing Sleep Sounds, Ocean Sounds. Okay, but when we actually talk to the skill, we're actually going to say, Alexa, play ocean sounds. We don't say all the beginning stuff. And so this is your opportunity to differentiate what is my skill name that people are going to say, and what is my skill name that people might see, because I want to differentiate myself. There's lots of cool sound machine skills, and they're all trying to differentiate themselves. So Relaxing Sleep Sounds is kind of the brand. And yeah, it's a public name versus the invocation name. That's exactly right, Ryan. Thank you. So that's what the difference is between those two. The real catch with this is that if I was to say open Relaxing Sleep Sounds, Ocean Sounds, Alexa doesn't know what that is. You have to use the invocation name in order to be able to make a skill execute the way you want it to. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that difference. So this invocation name, this is the thing that I expect people to say. So if this is different from my public name, then I want to make sure that I'm really clear on that. A good example of this is there's a number of these now, but at the time there was only one would you rather skill. And the whole point of this skill was to allow people to be presented with two difficult choices, and you have to pick one. Would you rather do this or would you rather do this, right? And the first one that came out had a lot of very, I don't want to call them adult scenarios, but they were gross. They were not things that you'd want your 8-year-old to be asked. And so someone built another version of it that they called Would You Rather for Families. Now, they didn't want people to be able to say open Would You Rather for Families. They just wanted people to say open Would You Rather. And so they have the same invocation name as the first one, but their public name, their marketing name, is Would You Rather for Families. And so as people see it, they're like, oh, a family one, that's the one I really want. But when they use it, all they have to do is say Would You Rather. So I hope that's clear. The last piece to this that probably rings a thought in your head is, well, how can two skills have the same invocation name? So let me quickly explain this as well, because I think this is an important thing to know. The way skills work, and like I was talking about this one earlier, ask Jeff Blankenburg to set the light to red. In this case, you have to enable a skill. It's the same way that if you think about your mobile phone, you have apps on your phone, and you have enabled the apps that you want to be able to use on your device. So you can't open the Twitter app if you haven't already downloaded it to your phone. You have to download it first. That's the enabling. And then you can tap on it, and then you can open the Twitter app or whatever. So that is kind of exactly how Alexa skills work, except that you don't have anything to download. All you have to do is say that I've enabled this on my account. And so by enabling something, you're going to use the one that you've chosen. So in the case of the Would You Rather skill, I have, what's the right way to say this? In the Would You Rather skill, if I enable the Would You Rather for Families skill, using the app or my voice or whatever, every other time that I say open Would You Rather, I'm going to use the skill that I enabled. It's not going to go look in the grand marketplace of everything else every time that I ask. It's going to use the ones that I've already chosen to enable on my account. So sometimes if you want to use a very specific skill, it's probably best to go into the skills store, which you can find in the Alexa app or at alexa.com/skills, and choose the ones that you want, and then when you talk to them, you'll use them every time. The one last catch to this is, let's say you enable two skills with the same invocation name, like the two Would You Rather examples. You've enabled both of them, but you got the family ones first. When you say open Would You Rather, it will choose the one that you enabled first. So in my case, it would open the families one every time that I ask for it, and the other one would just sit there kind of in a weird ghost mode where I'm never actually able to access it because it has the same invocation name. Now again, this is only because I chose to enable both of them. But if I were to enable the first, if I was to disable the first one, then the second one would immediately become the one that responds. So that's the only real catch to all of this, is that there's no land grab like we would have with domain names or anything like that. You can use any invocation name you'd like, as long as you're not violating copyrights and trademarks, things like that. But there's no issue with building a skill that has the same invocation name as something else. Just understand that people may already be using something with that name, and if they try to use your skill, they won't be able to because they've already enabled another one. So I hope that kind of explains how this works and how there isn't the need to like grab domain names as you go through all this. Okay, so we've gotten to our invocation name. We've changed it to Freddy Funko. One of the things that I'm going to do here is I'm going to save. Generally, I would also build, but actually I'll do that too just to show it. So when we're building, what we're actually doing is taking all of the information that's over here in our left-hand navigation, and we are combining all of that up into a package that Alexa can understand. So we're training the AI model, we're training the machine learning to be able to understand, when I say this thing to this skill, what thing should I do? And the example I always like to use for this is a real-world example. I'm assuming everyone at this point has used a DVD player. We've all seen one, we've all used one, we understand what the buttons on the front of a DVD player are, and I feel like this is a good explanatory example of how skills work. So if you think about your DVD player, you have a play button and a pause button, a stop button, an eject button, maybe there's a fast forward and a rewind button right on the face of the device, right? And without a remote control, if you were to walk up to that device, you have a really good idea of what it's capable of. I can play, I can pause, I can eject. The interface is laid out for me right there. What I would not expect to do, and I would not expect there to be a button for, is like, what's my bank balance? Or order me a pizza, right? Those aren't things you generally expect a DVD player to do. And so we have a scope in our heads about what the DVD player is capable of. And in some cases, you might be surprised. Maybe if we open up the DVD player and we see it on the screen and it has a bunch of other external apps, maybe there is a way to check my bank balance. But it's not generally in the scope of what I think a DVD player should do. So that scope, that mental model of what you think of a DVD player and what it should be capable of, that same process, that same exercise is what we're going to go through when we think about building a skill. So each of those actions, the play, the pause, the rewind, those are things that we call intents. And each of these intents is a thing that a user can try to accomplish. So you can see the list of the ones that we have here already. We have cancel, we have help, and we have stop. And those are pretty clear and obvious, right? At any time, if the user doesn't know what they're doing or needs better understanding about what they're trying to accomplish, they can say help or something like it. I don't know what to do or whatever. And all of those things will funnel into our help intent. And then we'll write some code to say, oh, you need help? Here's what I would recommend you try to do. And in the case of the DVD player, you might say, step 1, have you inserted a disc? Step 2, have you closed the drawer? Step 3, did you hit the play button? Right? You could walk them through steps to try to accomplish the thing that they're trying to do. Cancel and stop are also used somewhat hand in hand, but they could be separate if you need them to be. And those generally mean stop doing whatever you're doing, right? So if you were in the process of ordering a pizza with an Alexa skill, and you realize that your significant other just walked in the house with Chinese food, you're probably not going to want to be like, yeah, let's keep ordering this pizza. You'd want to say cancel to cancel my order. Or you might just say stop and completely exit the skill because you don't need to order that pizza anymore. Every one of these kinds of examples could be handled with cancel or stop or help. What we need to do is think about what are the special things that our skill can do, the stuff that's unique to our skill alone. And that's where these custom intents come in. So we have one, because we chose the Hello World template, we have one called the Hello World intent. And the name doesn't matter at all. You can call these whatever you'd like. But the Hello World intent lets my skill know that the user wants me to say hello world. And so we will then in code be able to write a response back to our user that says hello world. So let me show you how this works. I'll just go to my testing tab, which is here. And when I'm building this, I have logged into this developer console with my Amazon credentials, the same ones that I use to be able to buy things on Amazon.com and stuff like that. By doing that, I can use my own devices to be able to test the skill, like the one you can see here. But in addition to that, I can also test it right in the console. And so I'll start with the console, but I'll show you that this also works in development. So if I come in here and I say open Freddy Funko.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
So she's given me the option. I can say hello or help. What would I like to try? I'll say hello.
Hello world.
She says hello world, and then that's the end of our conversation. You'll notice she didn't say anything else. She didn't ask me another question. So I would need to open the skill again. So let me open Freddy Funko again.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
And this time I'll say help.
You can say hello to me. How can I help?
All right, let's say hello.
Hello world.
Cool. So you can see that our skill's working. It's giving us the responses we expect. This is not a robust skill in any way, but it's a good example of a working hello world sample. And if I jump over to this view, and I'm going to unmute my device, let's give this a try. Alexa, open Freddy Funko.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
Hello.
Hello world.
And you can see that my skill has closed and it turned the screen back to the normal default state. So in each of these cases, we were able to test it both in the developer console as well as on our devices. And so that's why you tend to see a collection of devices like this behind me. These are generally all of the devices that are available. And so I have an Echo Show, I have the Echo Show 8, I have the original Echo Show there in the back, and then I have an Echo Plus, I have a regular Echo, I have an Echo Dot with the clock on it, I have an Echo original V1 Echo Dot. I also have the Echo Spot, which is I can't really see it very well, but it's this round one back here. And then I have an Amazon Tap, which was a portable battery-powered one that looks like this. I put an extra case on it, but it's just this black tower that's sitting here inside. I really like this, especially when you want to sit out on the patio or take it out in a golf cart. This has enough battery to last the entire time that you're out playing around a golf, which is also very cool. You should ask Utah Gimme 2 about amazing golf shots and coming so close to beating their friends. It's a good story. Anyway, so that's where we're at right now. We have a skill that works and it's been tested, and we're good to go. So the next thing that we want to do is add some of that functionality that we were talking about. As we referred to the DVD player, we want to add our play button and our pause button and the things that our business card should do. It should be fairly noted that my friend Ryan did play a round of golf with me with only 9 fingers. He had just recently sliced his finger open with a knife, which I'm sure is another story for another time. But he played remarkably well, and I only beat him by a couple of strokes. with him only playing with 9 fingers. Okay, so this is the hello world intent. We actually don't need or want that, right? We're not actually building a hello world skill. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. And that's fine, we can delete that. But then I'm going to create a new one. And we're building a business card skill. So the first thing that I probably want to do is create an email intent. Let's do email first. So I have an email intent, and this is the thing that when people ask me about my email address, this is the place that they will end up. So imagine on the front of the DVD player there's an email button. When they tap on that, they will receive my email address. That's all we're doing, is building that interface. Let's see. Stephen Vore says, does that portable one have cell connection, or does your golf course have an incredibly strong Wi-Fi access point? It actually has neither, Stephen. What it does have is my cell phone in my pocket, which has a really strong cell phone connection. And then I use it as a Wi-Fi hotspot and connect the Alexa device to it. So that is how I use it on a golf course. But it's also just a great Bluetooth speaker if you just wanted to pair your phone to it. But by setting up a Wi-Fi hotspot and connecting the Amazon Tap to it, you could take it anywhere. As long as your cell phone has a signal, it should work pretty well. Okay, so I have my create intent. That was a great question, by the way. I'm going to create my custom intent. And this is where we start getting into what we call voice design. So we really need to think about, what does a user want to say when they ask for my email address? So they might say, what is your email address? Right? But they might also say, because this is kind of, it's not really me. Even though I have a skill called Jeff Blankenburg, you're not really talking to me. So you might also say, what is his email address? You might also say, what is Jeff's email address? You might just say email, right? I'm just trying to be very curt and short about what I want. I might just say email address. What are some other things? What is his email? What is Jeff's email? All right, we can continue going like this. Now, as a developer, the first time that I encountered this, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to think of every possible thing that someone might say to my skill. And to that I say no, you don't actually have to come up with every possibility. But what I do recommend is thinking about what things users might say to your skill and come up with a good representative sample of that. So I currently have 7. I'm going to do another one that most people forget about, which is like, for his email and for his email address. Because I can open the skill. So I would say something like, open Freddy Funko. And then it goes, okay, cool. What do you need to know? And I say, what is his email, right? That's a natural conversational way that we might do that. But you might also do something like what's on the sign behind me here, right? Where you just say, ask Freddy Funko for his email. And in that case, you want to be able to handle those kinds of cases where Freddy Funko, again, is the name of our skill. And then you just say for his email or for his email address or whatever. So these are all good examples of things that people might say. It's not a complete list. It's not even close. I'm sure all of you that are watching could come up with 5 or 10 more examples easily, because you speak slightly different than me. You have different words that you use. But in many cases, this will cover a lot of what people are saying, because what I'm building here is a model. I'm building a machine learning model for Alexa that says the user is going to say something like this. So when you hear something like this, do this thing. And so that's all we're going to do. We're just going to use the email as the example. And we'll go ahead and we'll save and we'll build. And there's something here that I like to do once I've got this constructed and I know that everything's working properly. I want to be able to test this stuff. Now, I don't know where all of you stand on the idea of unit testing and the ability to like really get in deep with understanding how my skill works and are things working the way that I expect them to. But we have these awesome tools right here called Evaluate Model. And unfortunately, let's see if I can scroll that up a little bit. The way the utterance profiler works is I can just say something like email. And what it shows me is that it is going to hit the email intent. So when the user says email, we're going to hit the email intent, which means my code will know, hey, we're going to do the email intent thing. right? That's how all this is ultimately going to work. If I were to say, now one of the examples I didn't write is for Jeff's email, right? I left that off purposely. So let's try that, for Jeff's email. You can see that it still hits the email intent, even though that's not an explicit example in my list of samples there. It's able to infer, based on the information that I've given it, that that's probably where it needs to end up. Now, as I add more intents to this skill, this might get a little broader. It might be that it misinterprets get for Jeff's email because it's too similar to something else. So I try to be very careful about how I think about my utterances and how I think about my intents so that they make sense in the context of everything else that I'm doing. So this is the email intent. This is good. This is me testing it very quickly. One of the other things that you can do, though, is this NLU evaluation. And in this one, I can actually create what I was talking about earlier, basically like unit tests for my design, for my voice model. So I'm going to create an annotation set here, and we're going to call this we'll call this email intent. And then I'm going to enter an utterance to make a new annotation. So we're going to say for Jeff's email. This is the one that wasn't really working. So I'm going to go ahead and enter this. And you can see that this becomes a unit test. So I have an utterance for Jeff's email. Then I have to tell it what intent I expect it to have. So in this case, I expect it to hit the email intent. I don't have any slot values because that's not something we're doing yet, but we will get there. And then if I have a timestamp or anything that I want in here, great, I can use that. But I don't need any of that for right now. So I'm going to save my set. In fact, let's add a couple more. So we'll do email, and we'll say that one's going to hit the email intent. This gets more complex, obviously, as we have more intents. And let's do what is his email address, and we'll do email intent for this one also. Whoop. So email intent, there we go. So we have 3 of them in there, and I'm going to save my set. And then we're going to come back to evaluate model, and we're going to see that we have this annotation set in here now, this email intent one. So I'm going to have it just run an evaluation. Now this takes a little bit of time because it's actually running each one of these independently and verifying the results. But for these 3 simple examples with a small model, it shouldn't take too terribly long. And I expect that my status should come through as true. I don't expect that I will fail because I haven't really done anything very complicated yet. And I've typed in things that generally are already verbatim utterances for my intent. So this should work. And it does. And you can see that it's complete and it passed. And I can come in here. And if I open this, I can see that all 3 of my tests pass, the expected values that I got, and that they each matched with the green light. If I were to, and we'll go back and do more of this later once we have more intents, but you can see that right now we all pass, but I will create a situation for us where we fail in just a little while. Okay, so we've looked at our tests. Everything like that seems to work. So the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to walk us through the entire pipeline. So we now have an intent, we have some utterances, we've tested it to make sure it all works. The next part of this pipeline is to write some code. So I'm going to come over to my code tab, and because we chose Alexa hosted, they put the code right here in the console for us, so we don't even have to go anywhere else. This is a code editor called Cloud9 that's hosted by AWS, and so I can come in here, I have different files, I can do all sorts of things. But what I need to do right now is handle that email intent handler. So the way that the code in these works is each one of these little chunks is a handler. We have a handler for every single intent. You don't have to. There may be situations in which you have multiple intents hit one handler. You may have multiple handlers that handle one intent depending on what's happening or what's coming through. And what we can do is set criteria for ourselves. So actually, before I get into this, there's one more thing that I want to show you before we get too deep into the code. I want you to understand what the thing is that we're working with. So I'm going to come back to test just to show you what really happens behind the scenes. So I'm going to say open Freddy Funko. Well, if I could type, that would be even better. Funko. And
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
so my skill started and it said hello or help, which is the thing that I expected. This is the part that I didn't show you earlier though. On the left-hand side, in this box that's scrolling, is what we call the request. This is the thing that comes into our code. This is the document that we're really working with. And so this is just JSON, and there's lots and lots of data in here. As I scroll down, you can see that there's information about what kind of viewport the user had, if they have a display screen or something like that. We can see what the user ID is. This is a unique user identifier that is unique to your skill and to the user. So the user doesn't have any idea what this thing is, and you wouldn't be able to match this to a user in any other skill. It's unique to the user and the skill, but it's unique. So every time the user comes back, you can use this as a way to know that it's the same person. In addition to that, we also have things like session IDs, and user ID is repeated up here in our session variables, but also in our context. We can also track device ID. Again, this is a unique device for a unique user in your unique skill. But you can also know that a user has used multiple devices across their entire, around their house, right? I mean, I've got 10 here behind me, but in my house, I probably have another 10 devices scattered around bedrooms and kitchens and stuff like that. Kitchens, as if I have multiple kitchens. We have just the one kitchen, I assure you. So that is how all of this works. And then down here at the bottom, this is usually the most important piece, which is the request. And this, at this point, it tells me, hey, you got a launch request. So that means that the skill was just opened. And as you can see here, that's exactly what I expected. Open Freddy Funko. All I did was tell it to open the skill. Ryan, you're killing me. Multiple kitchens. Woo. I don't even know what I would do with multiple kitchens. We just remodeled the one we have. So it's a nice kitchen, but it's still just the one. But I have a launch request here. This is what indicates to me that, hey, they just opened the skill. We should probably say something like, welcome, and here's some stuff you can try. If we do something else, like stop.
Goodbye.
You can see that down here, I got an intent request this time instead of a launch request. And then I also get an indication of what intent the user hit. And in this case, it happens to be the Amazon stop intent. But I only did that because we haven't actually written our code for our, what is the word I'm looking for? For our email intent. So if I open the skill again, open Freddy Funko.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
And then I say email. We're going to get an error.
You just triggered email intent.
But you can see that we are hitting the intent, email intent. So this document, this entire file here, that's 75 lines of JSON or whatever, 89 lines of JSON, that is the JSON that is delivered to our skill. And then over here on the right-hand side, this is the JSON that we send back to Alexa. So Stephen Vor, you're going to be on top of me too. Stephen Vor, second breakfast kitchen. I'm no hobbit, sir. But I am hungry, and it is time for second breakfast. So anyway, so this is how our intent request works. This is how email intent shows up. So then we would use this information to say, oh, they said the email intent, let's do the email intent thing. Okay, now that I've laid that foundation, now we can go back to the code. I just wanted you guys to be able to see that, like, this is how I know what the different intents are. This is how we know how to interact with our user. So now we end up with a chunk of code like this. This is each of our handlers. Down here at the very bottom, you can see that I have a manifest that says these are the handlers that I want available in my skill. Launch request handler, hello world intent handler, help, cancel, session ended, and intent reflector, which I'll explain. That's a special thing that we built just to help you as you're building. But this launch request handler has two methods. There's can handle and there's handle. This is all part of our Alexa SDK, which you can see I'm including here. But it makes it much simpler to navigate that file without having to parse a ton of JSON all the time. So in this case, what I'm doing is saying, is this a handler that I can use? So this is a conditional Boolean statement, and I'm saying, is the type of request that I got, is it a launch request? If it is, awesome, then let's do what's in the handle function. Let's go do this stuff. And we'll explain what that stuff is in a minute. In this case, this is my hello world intent handler. You can see that I actually have two Boolean statements, and they both have to be true in order to get in here. The first one is, what kind of request did I get? And it's an intent request. And in this case, what's the name of the intent? And is it hello world intent? Now I'm going to change this. I'm actually going to make this one the email intent handler. And I don't want the hello world intent. I want the email intent. Again, these are just strings. They can be whatever you want to call them. but this is generally the format that I follow as I go through this. So if these two things are true, is it an intent request? Is it an email intent? Then I want to do this code. And this is where we decide what Alexa is going to say back to the user. Now you could add a ton of logic here. Maybe you need to call an API, get some information, do some calculations, summarize all that together. But at the end of the day, what you're really sending back is a string that is what you want Alexa to say next. So in this case, for our email intent, I'm going to say Freddy's, I hate single quotes. We're going to change those as we go. Freddy's email address is, and I actually don't know what his email address is, so let's go find out. If we go to funko.com, I'm guessing they probably have a email address of some kind somewhere on their website. Maybe. Contact us. They don't have an email address listed, but I'm going to guess one. What if we go like terms and conditions? Sometimes they'll have a random weird email address on these. Support at Funko. See? All you got to do is know how to dig. And so we have an email address. So I'm going to go in here. No, I'm going to go to the developer console. Freddy's email address is, and you might think you're just going to paste it in here like this. Another important thing to remember as we're going through this is that we're writing words that Alexa's going to say. We're not writing words that anyone's going to read. So we would actually change this to be something like this. Support at funko.com. Now, you can write it the way we did. And another cool thing that we can do, I'm going to open this as a separate tab, is to go to my test tab. And I want to show you another way that you can know what Alexa is going to say. This is one of those things that can be a little frustrating if you're not sure or you're not confident. So this is the Alexa simulator. This is where we were typing conversations earlier. But there's also voice and tone. And in here, I can change this section out to be whatever I want. So I'm going to take this piece. I'm going to replace it with support at funko.com. Now, she might read it fine, but let's see.
Support at funko.com.
That's good. But we've built a bunch of stuff in to Alexa to make sure that she can read email addresses properly. I wonder what happens if I just do like...
At.
She always reads it as just at. I think she doesn't like ampersands, though. Let me check that one. I thought there were a few characters that we just couldn't... Yeah, see, that one throws an error. So if you're writing something and it has an ampersand in it, Alexa can't interpret those. She can't read them because it means too much other stuff behind the scenes. So you would have to write that one out as and. So just to be safe, I generally type things out entirely
And.
so that she can say the things that I expect her to say. So we'll go back to my code view here. And Freddy's email address is support at funko.com. That is the way I would write it. And then I would have to say, what else would you like to know? And so this allows me to prompt the user to say, hey, let's keep the conversation going. Is there something else you'd like to talk about? Now, there's a couple of pieces to this. What you can see is that I have a speak method that sits here. This is what we send back to Alexa. So I have a speak method. This is using speak output, which is the variable that we just defined. And so if I say email, Alexa will say back to the user, Freddy's email address is support at funko.com. What else would you like to know?
Showing music
Alexa,
from Amazon Music.
Stop. So I'm asking the user a question. However, I don't actually keep the microphone open. I don't actually let the user respond. That is where this reprompt comes in. And so what reprompt is, I like to explain this like a conversation. So I want you to imagine you and I are having a conversation, but that I can't actually hear or see you, because I actually can't hear or see you. But if I were to say, hey, what's the weather like outside today? And you just stare at me like you're staring at me right now, I'm going to probably ask you again, and I'll say something like, hey, well, is it going to rain today? Do I need an umbrella? Like, what's the deal with the weather outside? Do you know? And if you don't respond again, I'm going to assume we're done having a conversation. You're not responding. You're not interested in participating in this conversation. And Alexa treats it the very same way. If she asks you something and you don't respond, you get about 6 or 7 seconds to respond to Alexa. And if she doesn't hear anything, then she will say whatever in the reprompt. And so in this case, I might just say, what else would you like to know? And this means that if she hears silence the first time, she will give you another chance. Ice cream, that's rough. That's rough. Sorry, man. Thank you for joining, though. It's good to see you here. So in this case, she would say, what else would you like to know as a follow-up? And then if the user doesn't say anything again, then the microphone gets closed and the session is over. So we'll test this out here. I'll save and deploy my code, and then we can test out these kinds of different scenarios. So I've saved it. I'm going to deploy it. Should just take a second. We're just pushing a function up to Lambda, and we're done. So now we'll come back over to my testing tab, and we'll try this. So we'll go to the Alexa simulator, and this time we're going to say, open Freddy Funko.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
And I broke something. Let's talk about what I could have broken. Oh, I know what I broke. Maybe. I'm not even going to dig. So down here on the left-hand side, there's logs. If I click on this, this will take me to the logging for my skill, where hopefully I will be able to see what error I just created, because clearly I have broken something. Oh, hello world. Okay, this is an easy fix. You remember that I renamed this to email intent handler, but I mentioned down here we have a manifest. This is something I should have caught. It's referring to a thing that doesn't exist anymore. So I just needed to change the name of that. We'll deploy my code again, which again just takes a couple of seconds. And then we can go back and test this and see if it works. So open Freddy Funko.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
So this time I'm going to type email address.
Freddy's email address is support@funko.com. What else would you like to know?
And you can see that it's asked me for a question. There's a couple of things that are different in this development environment. One is that it doesn't ever get me to the reprompt. It's always just waiting for the answer, because this is kind of an asynchronous conversation. So they actually hold on to this stuff and keep the session open for me. But this is not how it normally works. Let me show you on a device how this same experience works. Alexa, open Freddy Funko.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
Email address.
Freddy's email address is support@funko.com. What else would you like to know?
Email.
Freddy's email address is support@funko.com.
Thank you for
What
coming,
else would you like
Francis.
to know? What else would you like to know?
Stop.
Goodbye.
Okay, so you can see that I actually let her wait. She didn't hear something for a moment. And so what happened there was she was able to respond to my question. She said what Freddy's email address was, and then she waited for a response. And when she didn't get a response, then she said, okay, this is not working. I'm going to try again. And she said whatever I provided in my reprompt. So that reprompt data that we're getting, the piece that we created right here, if I go back to the thing that you can see, if I come back in here and we look at my reprompt, this is the thing that she'll say only if she didn't hear anything the first time. But this is all tied together. If you don't provide this, Alexa never opens the microphone at all. And so you have to provide a reprompt in order to open the microphone at all. So Alexa will always say the first thing, but if you don't provide a reprompt, she will just close the skill and that will be the end, which feels kind of weird when you ask the question. So we ask a question, we provide a reprompt, and that allows the user to have an opportunity to speak. And if they missed it or they walked out of the kitchen or whatever room the device is in, they can be like, oh, they're still waiting for an answer, and they can come back in and respond the second time. That is not something we can control. That is built into how Alexa works. And so there's no way to manipulate that. There's no way to make the amount of time she listens longer. all of that becomes a bit of a security concern, honestly, if you just think about keeping a microphone open all the time. So it's designed specifically so that when a user stops talking, even if they walk away, it will end up closing the skill for you, and you don't have to worry about it staying open and continuing to listen or anything like that. Okay, so we've successfully built our first handler, our first intent, which is the email intent handler, and that's more or less done. The other thing that I wanted to build was something for Twitter, for phone number, for a bunch of other stuff. So what I'm going to do first, before I get into more of the contact information, is I want to build one for favorites. Because I think another fun thing, if you're building a skill about yourself, is to be able to let people know stuff you're into. Like, what's your favorite things, right? So what we're going to do is go back to the Build tab. And we're going to create another intent. Now, this time we're going to do it a little differently. You can see that I actually created a very specific email intent. For favorites, there's so many, right? There's so many different things that you may have a favorite thing of, right? A favorite food, a favorite hotel chain, a favorite airline, a favorite sports team, a favorite Funko figure, a favorite, like there's lots and lots, right? So we want to come up with only the ones that we're actually going to answer. And we can do that with something called slots. This allows us to really refine the amount of data we're getting from the user and understand very specifically words that they're saying. So in this case, I'm going to create a new intent, and this time we're just going to call it, instead of like favorite team, I'm just going to call it favorite intent. And then I might have some utterance like we created before that might be something like, what is his favorite baseball team? Right? And then I would have another one that is, what is his favorite football team? Now, the catch with this is that I don't actually, if you recall when we looked at our tests, nowhere in here did I say, oh, and here's all the words the user said. I know that they wanted the intent request that is called email intent, but I don't know anything else about what the user actually said. This is by design, right? We don't want the developer to be able to see all the words that you might have said. And there's good reason for this, right? Imagine you're in your kitchen and you're asking about a specific thing in a custom skill, and your wife is on the phone and she says her social security number out loud as she's talking to someone else on the phone, and Alexa hears it and passes that along to the skill. You wouldn't want that to happen, right? So we don't pass those values along unless you're specifically looking for them. And so all I know when they say, what is his email address or whatever, all I know is that they said, do the email thing. I don't know anything else about what actually is going down. If I need more specifics, that's where slots become very handy. So with slots, what I'm going to do is, instead of what is his favorite football team and baseball team, I wouldn't know the difference between these two. What I'm going to do instead is change this, and I'm going to create what we call a slot. So I've just highlighted that, and I'm going to call this favorite. This is just a new slot. Think of it like a variable in a sentence, and I want to be able to swap out this for a bunch of different values. So I'm going to hit add, and then I can actually get rid of this other one because I don't need the same kind of statement. So I could say, what's his favorite? And then I can just choose that slot over and over. I could also just do favorite, right? Like, what if they just said football team or something like that? They didn't actually indicate favorite or anything like that. So we can continue to grow this list, but the important thing is to know what are the values that we could put inside favorite. So you can see if we scroll down here that we have this new slot that we've defined called favorite, and it wants me to choose a slot type. This is the data, the training data, behind that slot so that we understand the kinds of values that we would expect a user to say. And I know my video is blocking this a little bit, but we have things like airport and city and author and book, and this list goes on and on. These are all built-in slot types that Amazon's provided for us to not have to build our own. So languages, months, movies, numbers, dates, there's all sorts of cool stuff in here. But we're not going to use any of these. What we're going to do instead is create our own. And so we'll create a new slot type, which is over here on the left-hand side. And my new slot type is going to be called favorite. And now I need to type in values that I think would reflect the kinds of things users might ask about. So they might ask what my favorite color is. They might ask for my baseball team. my football team, city, country, basketball team, soccer team. You can see it's even recommending things to me, right? So I can think about what is my favorite book? What is my favorite Funko figurine? Camera, microphone. I'm just naming things I see in front of me. Echo device. Like these are all examples that I might want to support, right? The thing that to remember is that you shouldn't put anything in this list that you're not planning on answering, and you can always edit this list later. So I've probably overdone it here, but I think this is a good starter kit. So I have a list of items. I have a slot value called favorite. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and then I'm going to come back to my favorite intent, where I've defined all this stuff. What's his favorite, whatever. And now when I look at my slot types, I have a new one called favorite. And I can choose that. So now it knows that, hey, when I talk about this slot, what I really mean is look at that list of values. And so I'm trying to think if there's anything for his favorite. And you can understand that the blue value that we're seeing there, that is a representation of that whole list. So I don't have to build one for every single item that I might have in that list. For his, and we'll do one without the word favorite. Just include that. What is his Okay, so we have a good sample of that. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to hit build. I'm going to pull up my stool. I've been standing for like an hour. Sit down a little bit. And so again, we're building our model. It takes longer the more data that you have. And so now I've created a new intent. I've created an intent that has a slot in it, and I've created an entire slot value. And so our slot type. So all of that stuff needs to be trained and pulled together into everything else that Alexa knows, right? She has information about every conversation that's ever happened, and she can use that stuff to inform the decisions about what happens inside of our skill. Okay, so we did this earlier with evaluate model. Let's try seeing what happens now if we build another set of annotations. This one we'll call favorite. And I'm going to say, what is his favorite baseball team? Now this has nothing to do about the answer. This is all about interpreting what the user says. What is his favorite color? What is his favorite animal? Let's see what happens here. Because we didn't put animal in our list before. And we'll do what is his favorite echo device. Okay. So I have those four. I should expect that all of these are going to hit the favorite intent. So I think that's reasonable to choose. And then what I expect the slot value to be. So I'm going to choose which slot. I have to type it. Favorite. And this one will be echo device, so I'll choose echo device. For this one, the slot value will be none of those. So we're going to choose animal and hope that that comes through still. For this one, we're going to choose favorite, and this one will be color, so we can choose that from our list somewhere. Oh, it filters it down, color. There we go. And then finally we have favorite and baseball team. And again, it's using all those slot values that I've created to inform these drop downs. So I have my annotation set. I'm going to save that. And if you guys have questions about this stuff, please feel free to chime in the chat. I love having a good conversation, or if things need more explanation, I'm more than happy to do it. This is talking with all of you folks is one of my favorite parts of the day. So I have created my annotation set. Now let's go run this thing. We'll choose favorite intent and run it. Again, this will take a little bit longer than it did the first time, but it shouldn't take too long. Shouldn't take too long. Okay, and it passed. So that's actually a really good sign, because that means that the animal one is working the way I expect it to. It's using all of the utterances that I have for things like what is his favorite, and still saying, oh, he said animal. That's not something that matches, but I'm still going to pass it through. And I'll show you how we can use that information in our code. So in this case, all of them passed, and I was able to have my favorite Echo device. Now, one of the other things I wanted to see is, let's go back to my annotation set. Can I get back in and edit that? I would love to. Yeah, I want to add some more things to this. So let's edit my favorite intent. I'm interested to see what happens if I say this. What is his favorite email address? Right, we've added some weirdness to this, because email address is something that we say over on the other one. I'm going to choose favorite intent. I think this is what will happen, because this is what should happen. But if I choose favorite and then I choose email address, like that, and we'll save this annotation set, and we will run this again and see what we get. So email intent. Nope, I want the favorite intent, and hit run. And we'll run this one, and hopefully it still passes. We should end up with the same situation where all 5 of those cases should pass. And if it fails, it fails. But that means that this is a good indication to us. Oh, it did fail. Okay, so let's see what happened. And let's see how we can fix it. I expected that it was going to give me the favorite intent, but it gave me the email intent. I expected there to be a slot called favorite. There was no slot, because the email intent doesn't have one. And I was expecting the value to be email address, but of course I didn't even have a slot, so I didn't get the thing. So this is very interesting, because it's what is his favorite email address. I would have expected this to just work, but we can make it work. What we can do instead is come into our favorite slot, our slot type, right? I'm going to add email address to this, and we'll save and build our model. And what will happen here is the machine learning model should be able to now say, oh, okay, so if he says something like that with favorites, we're probably meaning the favorite intent. But if he says it the other way, where it's just the word email address by itself, that's where we run into issues. And so it should be able to interpret those two separately. But you can also see that we have this module right here called utterance conflicts. This is also a very clear message to us that we have built 2 intents that conflict with each other, and that Alexa's never going to know what the right one to do is. She's going to pick one, but we may not know what it is. And so you can see utterance conflicts. Now I have 3. So what it says is, if the user says email address, I don't know if that's the favorite intent or the email intent. I don't have a good way to know this, because again, we have an utterance for this that is just email address. We also can say for his email address, and now I don't know which one of these it is, because these end up being the same. And what is his email address, and what is his favorite, right? These are all exactly the same statements when we plug the word email address in. So how do we fix this? Well, we hope that people don't say what is his favorite email address. But if they do say what is his favorite email address, it wouldn't be bad to be able to say, oh, his email address is this, right? That's a reasonable response to that. So I'm going to go back to my favorite slot type, and I'm going to delete the word email address. And we're just not going to worry about that, because I think if they ask what my favorite email address is, they're going to end up in the email intent, and that's okay. That's kind of an okay place to put them. Oh my gosh, I see that my lovely mother is here watching. She just said, interesting. Mom, if you want to try this, say enable Jeff Blankenburg to your device first, and then you can say things like this, like ask Jeff Blankenburg to change the light to red, or blue, or green, or whatever. In fact, I'll change it myself. Alexa, set Office LifeX to white. Boom. All right, so you guys can say this kind of stuff. Any of you that are watching, you're welcome to change the light. It's kind of fun to have an interactive session where I see the light changing, but there's no need to do it if you don't feel like it. So we've built our model. We have email address dropped out. The other thing that we need to do with favorite is then build some code to be able to catch what the user said and know the values that they provided. So let's go back to code now that we have our new favorite intent. And if you recall earlier, we had our launch request. We have our email intent handler that's sitting here. But we need another one that is for favorites. So I'm just going to copy this chunk. And we're going to call this one favorite intent handler. And I would expect the favorite intent to show up here. Again, they don't have to match one-to-one, especially as you're building more robust logic into your skill. As I said earlier, you could have multiple intents that land here. You could also have one intent that lands in multiple handlers. It really depends on what you're doing with your logic. So what I need to do here first in this chunk is make sure that I have my favorite intent. I also want to register it in my manifest down here. So I need a favorite intent handler. So that is all set. That's good. And the last thing that I need to do then is when we do have the favorite intent, I need to be able to give them the right answer. So the first thing we need to know is, what did they ask us? So I'm going to have var favorite. This is the variable to catch the favorite thing that they said. And now I need to figure out what they said. So if we come to our test module, I'll show you how this is represented in the code. So let's make sure I'm not in the middle of a session. And we'll just say open Freddy Funko.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
And let's say, what is his favorite color?
You just triggered favorite intent.
Now I haven't built any of the code, so that's okay. But what I want to see down here at the bottom, maybe, this has gotten much more robust, is that it's an intent request. It's a favorite intent. That's what we expect. But then down here I have slots, and it indicates that the slot that I named favorite has a value of color. That's the word that I typed here. Then we get this additional piece, which we may have time to use today, which is called resolution. The proper name for this is entity resolution. We're resolving against an entity of data, which happens to be our slot type. And so it's saying that, like, hey, in your slot, you had a value called color, and it matched that perfectly. Just wanted you to know, right? So that if you're trying to do something very specific, you can identify that, like, oh, they actually said something that I know about. It's something I put in my list. So let's use that and do something effective with it. And that's a good way for us to know whether or not they match something that we expected. And if they don't match something, if I don't get any resolution values, then it's a way for me to know that, like, oh, they said something weird that I don't know. I can just tell them, like, hey, I don't know that, or whatever. So that's what we're going to do here. So in our code, I keep standing up. I want to sit down while I do this. So I need to know what the value of that spoken value is. So the first thing is handler input dot request envelope. This is what refers to the that entire JSON file that we were just looking at. So if I jump back there, what you can see is that we have handler input dot request envelope, and then everything else is inside here. So if I wanted something inside this node, I would say dot context. But what I really want is the stuff down here. So I want dot request, and then I want dot intent. So let's jump back here. Dot request, dot intent. Make sure we get this right. Dot intent, dot slots, because this is the next node of this, right? And then inside here, we have dot favorite. That's the name of the slot that we're looking for. And then we have the value. So I want dot slots, dot favorite, dot value. That's the value that I'm looking for. So we do dot slots, dot favorite, dot value. That should be the value of the slot that we just received. So this should be the word that the user actually spoke when they said, what is his favorite, whatever, right? And it'll come through, and I will be able to use those words to do something. But the thing we don't know is, what did they say? And how can we effectively match that against other things? So the natural way to do this initially is to just do some pattern matching. So we could do something like a switch statement, and we could just switch it on favorite, like so. And then we could have a case for color, for example. If they say color, then we'll do this. And then if they were to say football team, might do something like this. So, and then in these cases, we're going to define what we would say back to the user. So I'm going to define my speak output up here. We're going to call it speak output. And I'm just going to say it's nothing right now, right? That's just an empty string of words. There's nothing in there. And then I can get rid of this line. So now in here we can say, well, if they say color, speak output is, I don't know, Freddie's favorite color is blue. You can see this in most of his outfits. What else? Actually, we'll do it another way. So that is what we want to say for when they say color. But remember, we always want to ask the user a question at the end. Like, what else do you want to know? Is there something else I can help you with? So at the end here, regardless of what case we land in, I also want to do speak output. What else do you want to know about Freddie Funko? All right. So what I've done here is I've set a case. So if they say color, then I will say this. If I say football team, I haven't defined that yet. So Freddie's favorite football team is the Seattle Seahawks. He lives less than 30 minutes from the stadium. Okay, so now we have color and we have football team. You can see how I could continue adding cases, and we would eventually have a long list of things to say when it's a favorite, but regardless of what we say, we will always tack on to the end with speak output here. What else do you want to know about Freddie Funko? And then we will provide that as the thing that we say back to the user. And again, we'll reprompt them with what else would you like to know. So it's, again, a slight variation on the same question. Okay, so I think all of this should work. The trick that we're missing right now is what if they say something that I didn't expect, or what if they say colors? Because I'm actually trying to match just the word color. So we have some ways to fix this, and it's going to involve that entity resolution stuff that we talked about a moment ago. But let me get started with this. Let's just test it and make sure that this works. I'll be very deliberate about the words that I use, but we know that our users won't be. They're going to say the things that they want to say, the way that they want to say them, and we need to be able to anticipate those. Okay, so in here, I'm coming back to my test. So let's say quit, just to get back to the beginning. Open Freddie Funko.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
What is his favorite color?
Freddie's favorite color is blue. You can see this in most of his outfits. What else do you want to know about Freddie Funko?
Okay, that worked perfectly. Now let's try something with colors. Let's see if that gets us what we want. It should not. What is his favorite colors?
What else do you want to know about Freddie Funko?
Do you see how we did get the answer there that time? The reason for that is because inside this switch statement, we didn't hit any of the criteria, so it skipped it entirely and came down here and just got this piece. What else do you want to know about Freddie Funko? That's a good default, but that's not really a good response, right? We want the user to be able to understand that, like, hey, you didn't say something I was expecting. So we have to dig a little deeper on this and make sure that we're actually matching a value we expect them to give, so that the values we expect are reflected here in this switch statement. So to do that, we're going to have another variable we'll call resolved favorite. And this is that entity resolution. So we're going to do the same thing. Handler input, maybe, dot request envelope, dot request, dot intent, dot slots, and now I have to remember what the rest is. So let's come in here and see what this actually looks like. So you can see that I have my intent right here, my favorite intent. I can see that I got the word colors. This is not something that I'm going to be able to control. Users are going to say what they want to say. But this value, this is the value from my slot, and this will always be consistent. So what I can do instead is, instead of slots.favorite.value, I can do slots.favorite.resolutions. So let's dig into this a little bit. resolutions, and then resolutions per authority. So I'm going to do slots.favorite.resolution. Was it resolution or resolutions? Resolutions, and then resolutions per authority. Resolutions per authority, and that's an array. You can see here as I'm digging through this, most of these have curly braces, but resolutions per authority starts with a bracket and then curly braces, so we could have multiple items in that list. So I'm just going to choose the first one, which happens to be this chunk here. So if we're looking at just this, and then inside here, so I indicated 0 because I want the first one. Then I want values, and that's also an array. So we'll do dot values, and we'll say 0 for that one. And then the last piece of this is values.value.name. That's the thing that I really care about. Okay, so let's do this. Values.value.name. That's a long string. There's another thing to keep in mind. If you have much experience writing JavaScript, you know that if all of these prior, like I have name here, that's the thing that I'm really trying to get. But if any of these don't exist, then the whole thing fails. So I'm going to be very careful about this. We could write a bunch of other functions to make this safer and worry about that stuff, but I'm not, for just building a simple demo, I think that this is fine. I just have to be very conscious of the fact that it could break if I say something that isn't expected. So we have favorite and we have resolve favorite. So what I'm going to do instead here is take this and put it here. And now I'm checking against a list of data that I created, right? Even if they said color or colors, it still resolves to color. And I can use color as the thing that I really want to act on. So we can still use this favorite, though. This is the thing the user actually said. So we could have one last value, which is my default. And in here I can say speak output equals, I actually don't know what Freddy's favorite, and I don't know what they said. I don't really care what they said. I just know that I want to say it back to them. So I'm going to say favorite as a variable. Let's see if I can scroll this for you so you can see. I actually don't know what Freddy's favorite blank is. I'll investigate and try to figure it out. And we'll put a semicolon at the end of that. And now we have an example that handles all the cases in which resolve favorite didn't have a value, or didn't have a matching value, I should say. So actually, let's do this another way. This will be safer in case things break. I'm trying to do this in a safe way, but I know that this statement, I'm going to put this here. I actually don't know what Freddy's favorite thing is. I'll investigate, try to figure it out. And then this resolve favorite, like I said, this could break if I don't actually resolve anything. And I think that's okay for now. There are ways, again, to solve that problem. I just don't want to do it here while we're building cool stuff. So I actually don't know what Freddy's favorite thing is. I'll investigate and try to figure it out. What else do you want to know about Freddy Funko? So let's deploy that. And we'll try a couple of things. Okay, back to testing. Quit our skill. Open our skill.
Welcome. You can say hello or help. Which would you like to try?
Favorite color.
Freddy's favorite color is blue. You can see this in most of his outfits. What else do you want to know about Freddy Funko?
So you can see this time I'm typing favorite colors, which is what we failed on earlier.
Freddy's favorite color is blue. You can see this in most of his outfits. What else do you want to know about Freddy Funko?
And so down here you can see, again, that I got the value colors from the user, but it resolved out to color. And this is the value that I'm actually checking on in my switch statement. So now if I say football team,
Freddy's favorite football team is the Seattle Seahawks. He lives less than 30 minutes from the stadium. What else do you want to know about Freddy Funko?
So I'm going to use one of the items that's in the list that we don't have code for yet. One of the other ones that we wrote was Echo Device.
I actually don't know what Freddy's favorite device is. I'll investigate and try to figure it out. What else do you want to know about Freddy Funko?
So in that case, you should try talking to mine. Alexa, ask Jeff Blankenburg for his favorite football team. Utah, give me two. Just
My
ask this
favorite
question.
American football team is the Cleveland Browns. My favorite soccer team is the Columbus Crew. What would you like to know?
Quit. So it's in there. It definitely did say the Cleveland Browns for mine, but I don't think Freddie likes the Seahawks, or doesn't like the Browns. I think he's probably a Seahawks fan. Everything is right in the world. Correct. So you can see that it's working, and so if I haven't written the code yet for those other values, it's okay. She'll just give me this error. Where we run into things is if I say, what is his favorite Lego set? This is not something that I put in our slot value. This should cause an error.
Freddy's email address is support@funko.com.
Oh, that's
What
interesting.
else would you like to know?
I wonder why it went to the email intent. That's pretty interesting. If we come to this, to the build tab, you remember we had the NLU evaluator that we were using? These are other things that you could build as unit tests to say like, well, why did that land there? So if I just come in and I type in Lego set, it considered these other intents, but it thought the best match was email intent. I have literally no idea why, but Alexa's machine learning tells her that this is the thing that it should be. But if I type, what if I type in, what is his favorite email address? I'm sorry, Lego set. Now, by using the word favorite, you can see that now she very much prefers this. Favorite intent, and I would get the value Lego set. So if we come back to my testing, what is his favorite Lego set? This should break.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I had trouble doing what you asked. Please try again.
And the reason for that is because our code doesn't have any resolutions, right? So if we were doing resolutions, resolutions per authority, I don't even remember what we typed, .values, .value, .name, the values and the value and the name don't exist, and because they don't exist, we would get errors. And this is the nice formatted error message that we get. And that leads me to talking about the other intents that are available in here, as we're getting a little short on time. It's 11:30 already, my goodness. So let me show you what else is happening inside this skill, because there is other code that was written for us. This is the help handler. So actually, let's fix a few things first. Welcome, you can say hello or help. We want to change this. You can ask me, here, let's do this. Hi, I am Freddy Funko. What would you like to know? Okay, so we've changed our intro. The next thing we do is, hey, you can say hello to me. How can I help? You can ask me for my contact information, like email address, or some of my favorites, like colors or football teams. I'm using those as examples because I know they already work. But that's my help message now. So when the user asks for help, this is the message that they will hear. When they say cancel or stop, I'm just going to say goodbye, which I think is perfectly fine. I get a lot more elaborate with this in my own skills. I actually extract all my speech and everything to data tables, but I use a service called Airtable for this kind of stuff. And in here, I can show you what I did with the Jeff Blankenburg one. I have a goodbye table, and these are all the things that Alexa might pick when you say goodbye or stop. She might say, catch you on the rebound, or gotta go, Buffalo. These are all very, very different, but it's kind of fun that every time you leave the skill, you get a very, very different response from Alexa. Love, peace, and chicken grease. Toodaloo, kangaroo. This is from The Truman Show. Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. later potato. There's lots of these kinds of things in here. And so what I do in my code is I actually have Alexa go out and grab just one of these randomly and say it back to you. Yeah, that's probably true. Being a Seahawks fan is a very telling character trait. Very good point, Ryan. Okay, so I'm done talking about the data stuff, but I just wanted to show you can get very elaborate with how you speak to a user. But for this, if they say cancel or stop, goodbye is a perfectly reasonable goodbye. This session ended request handler, we don't actually get to say anything here. This is usually when the skill ends abruptly or there's an error or anything like that. We will get a session ended request, and this allows us to maybe persist some data or save something or retain some state for our user in the case that something goes wrong. So it's not an error handler. It's very much, hey, the session ended. Is there anything you want to do before we leave? Again, you wouldn't be able to speak, but you can at least save some of your data or do something like that. This is another one that we've built custom for our templates, which is the intent reflector. All this does is if you, as you're building, you notice I've done this a couple of times. I built the email intent handler. I tried to test it. Oh, I just saw the light change to green. Nice work, someone. In this case, it just tells me like, hey, you asked for this intent, but you don't actually have any code to handle that. So this is a way for me to let me know like, oh, you asked for the intent handler, but you didn't actually do anything with it. And then we automatically quit, right? We don't even reprompt. We just let them know that, hey, by the way, you asked for the email intent, but I don't have any code for that. That's basically what it's saying. Finally, we have an error handler, and this error handler is what actually catches our errors. So if something goes wrong in our code, talking to data, whatever, this error handler is going to be triggered. And in this case, what I'm doing is I'm logging out the error stack. I want to know exactly what went wrong, what line it happened on, so that I can go fix it. And then Alexa says to the user, sorry, I had trouble doing what you asked. Please try again. And then we do the same response that we do with everything else, right? We just let the user know like, oh man, that broke. Hopefully it's fixed. Hopefully it's just a blip in the internet or something like that. And then it's not something more serious wrong, but you're basically telling the user like, oh, what? I just screwed up. I'm so sorry. Try that thing again. Let's see if we can get it right this time. So that's what my error handler does. Again, you can change this speech to be whatever you'd like. And then I have my manifest down here at the bottom. So that's the entirety of my code. There's nothing more to it than these chunks of responses and a manifest at the bottom. So that's building an entire skill. Do you guys have any questions? I know we've got a decent number of people tuning in right now. I'd love to know if there's anything that didn't come across as clear, or if there's any other questions I can answer for any of you. I'd love to be able to answer them now. I love when this is more of a two-way conversation. So if there's anything that I can answer for you, I'd love to do that. But we'll go ahead and we'll add a couple more of our favorites. So I'll take that one. We'll do baseball team. Oh, I know another thing I can share with you. Everything that let's change this to the Mariners. Favorite baseball team is the Seattle Mariners. And we'll do nobody really knows why. Okay, so I've added that, I've saved it, I've deployed it. But there's a cool thing to know about building your skills. Is it possible to migrate code hosted in an AWS Lambda to an Alexa-hosted node tenant? Yeah, I think there is. If you have a Lambda running today, what you'd have to do is build a new skill to get the endpoint, but then I think you could use the endpoint however you'd like. So if I came in here to build, down here at the bottom I have endpoint, and this is a Lambda function that was created specifically as this Alexa hosted thing. So my thought is that I could probably build another skill that uses this same Lambda function. I don't see why you couldn't. But I could be wrong. My thought is if you already have a published live Alexa skill, you wouldn't be able to change it to like a whole new skill. Let's just test this. If I take this, I'm going to take that thing,
And we're going to go, this is a really good question, Ryan, actually. This is nothing I thought to answer before. But if you want to get off of a hosted world and you already have a skill that's published, so I'm going to create a new skill, and we'll just call this delete me because I don't want to keep it. And I want to provision my own. So I'm saying I want the backend to exist. This is what like an existing skill you might already have might look like. If I come into this, start from scratch is great. If I change the endpoint here to be the endpoint that we just had, I wonder if I can do that. Save. Ooh. No, I cannot do that. Man, I was hoping you could. So if you want to build a new skill and move your code from your existing Lambda into the Alexa hosted one, you can do that, but you'd basically be building a new skill. So if it's already published, that becomes a little tricky. If you haven't published it yet, then I don't think you have any issue at all, and it would be very easy to move things over. But if you are already published, it doesn't look like you can use one of these Alexa hosted options retroactively, which is kind of what I was hoping it would do. But I think what they do, if I go look at an actual Lambda function, I can show you kind of what's happening under the covers here. Maybe. Sign in. So Ryan, yeah, the answer to your question is if your skill is not public, you could create a new skill and copy everything over and it would work perfectly. That would be no issue at all whatsoever. If I look at a Lambda function though, one that I've created, like the Alexa one I have here. So this is the actual Lambda function for the Jeff Blankenburg skill that changes the light. And what you can see in here is that I have the Alexa skill kit set as a trigger, and down here, I don't have, well, let's find one that I actually have done. So, last modify, let's see if I have one that is self-hosted. Maybe this one. Well, the way that the Alexa hosted ones work is that you have this trigger, which means Alexa Skills Kit can call your Lambda function, but it is specifically tied to a very specific skill ID. And so that's what this down here, this skill ID verification is not set for this trigger. When they create that Lambda function for you, it is tied specifically to that skill and only that skill so that you can't use it in additional places. That's how it should work. That's how you should set your own Lambda functions up. But a lot of times people will leave them open because you want to call it from another API or from another service or something like that. So that's what they're doing, is basically just using this skill ID verification. And that's why I got the error on the other one. Yep, everything else is free. The only thing that you could potentially spend money on is if you run a Lambda and you run it a ton, like you build a skill that's wildly popular. But the way that the AWS free tier works, it's pretty hard to get out of the free tier, which is good. So you're very rarely going to run into a situation where it costs you money anyway. So that's kind of the good news in all of this. All right, so let me see if there's anything else that I can do or check as we're finishing up here. We have all of this working. I wanted to check and see. Lego set's still not going to work because I haven't fixed that error, but I'm not. For our demo, I wasn't going to fix that error. I was aware it was there. Certainly, Ryan. Glad you could be here, man. Thanks for sticking around for 2 whole hours. It's been fun. Are there any other questions? Utah Gimme 2 has been fantastic, but if anybody else has any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Otherwise, we'll end a couple minutes early. But I hope you guys were able to learn from this. I'm going to publish this video out to my YouTube channel, which, as we may have guessed through this entire adventure, is Jeff Blankenburg. You can find me out there. So if you want to visit back this or see exactly how this this stuff worked, or how did I get to do that thing, or how did I create the annotation sets, that video will be on my YouTube a bit later today. If there aren't any other questions, I'm happy to call it a day. I generally am here every Monday and Wednesday from 10 to noon Eastern time. I'm thinking about adding Fridays since there's literally nothing else to do and there's nowhere to go. I might add Friday mornings as well as another opportunity. One of the things that I really want to get into is that you can use the Lego Mindstorms as a way to be able to have Alexa control these. You could have it like raise an arm or light things up or do all sorts of stuff with Legos, which I do love. So there's a lot of work to getting one of these set up initially, and then it's pretty easy. But I haven't done it before, and so I'm going to spend some time, I think, on Friday morning going through all of that. You should also know, if you're watching me here on my own channel, awesome. But I also do a bunch of streaming on the Amazon Alexa channel, which is just twitch.tv/Amazon Alexa. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to be interviewing one of our Alexa champions from Israel. Her name is Adva Levin, and she's going to be just having a 1-hour conversation with me. It's at the same time, 10 a.m. Eastern. And we'll talk for an hour about building skills and some of the inspiration and ideas she's had for some of the successes she's built. She has some really successful, popular skills. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation. So if you're looking for that kind of content, that'll be on the Alexa channel, Amazon Alexa channel tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I'm always here Monday, Wednesday, and probably Friday at 10 a.m. to noon. And then we have a bunch of other stuff on the Alexa channel, and the schedule's published there. So lots of cool things to see, including robotics shows and games and all sorts of other fun stuff. So thank you guys all for tuning in. Please check that stuff out, and we will see you all again very, very soon.